Welcome to Film and Page. I'm Dominic, and in this video I'm going to be talking about the book Corey Feldman, Coreyography, a Memoir, originally published in 2013 by St. Martin's Press, written by Corey Feldman, clocking in at 288 pages. No physical copy for this one since it was an ebook. If you grew up in the 1980s, you knew who Corey Feldman was, and if you didn't know him by name, you at least knew his face. He was in some pretty big movies back in the 1980s. And the first film I remember him being in is the Gremlins film. I went and seen that film during the summer of 1984. And that was a big movie back in the 80s. That was a very popular movie, and it's one I rewatched quite a bit as a kid. And also he was in Goonies. That was another very popular big hit of a movie. That one I seen quite a bit as a child as well. And then another movie that I love is The Lost Boys. He was in that one with Corey Haim. That was another movie that I've watched a lot and still rewatch to this day. And another big film that I'm a big fan of is Friday the 13th Part 4, The Final Chapter. He was in that movie, and that was also a big hit of the 1980s as well. So his star really shot up there when he was a kid. He was very, very popular. So this is a book that I just had to read because I always have this interest in pop culture history, especially pop culture history of the 1980s and the 1990s, since those were the decades I grew up in. Now, as for the plot of this book is, well, it's about Corey Feldman's life. Starting as a child, how he got into films, and how films really impacted his life, how he shaped his life, and how the movie business and movies and all that is just such a big part of his life. You really can't disconnect the two. Not only that, there is a real dark side to this book because it talks about how he got in the movies and films as a child, but also how he was really taken advantage of by a lot of the adults in his life who should have known better and who should have been like a better guiding force. I mean, he was taken advantage of by parents, by managers, by a lot of people, taken advantage of for his money, for his fame. Not only that, taken advantage of sexually as well. So a lot of dark stuff in this book. That's basically what the book is about. It's about his life in Hollywood, growing up in Hollywood, being a child star, and how that has affected him. Now, what I found interesting, though, reading this book, is that it was a bit of a nostalgia trip because it goes through a lot of the films he was in, how he got those roles, things that happened on set. So that side of the book was like the fun side of the book. But there definitely was the dark side too, that deals with how he was sexually abused, how people took advantage of him, things like that. And what's interesting about it is when you watch these movies that he was in as a kid, or you heard about child actors, or you read anything about them, there was always this illusion that they had these fantastic lives that you couldn't even comprehend. You could only dream about it. From that perspective as a kid, you would think that these were the luckiest kids in the world because they get to be in Hollywood. They get to be in these fantastic movies, and they get to have all this unimaginable fun that you could only dream about as a kid. And then as you become older and you start to learn about the dark side of that industry, and you start to hear about all the bad stuff that went down with these child stars, like everything that happened to Corey Feldman, Corey Haim, stuff that you heard about happened to Drew Barrymore, like when she was by 9 or 10 years old, she was already an alcoholic. I mean, really crazy stuff like that. That it's not this thing that you think it was when you were a kid. It was the complete opposite. Yes, there was some good in there, but also there was a lot of bad. And then when you really see the reality of it, then you really think to yourself, wow, I wouldn't want to trade places with this guy at all. I'll keep my mundane, boring life. Thank you. So that part of the book, I thought that was really interesting. And that's what I kept thinking as I read this book. What else about this book that I thought was interesting, but also sad, is that the book goes into a lot of the friendship that Corey Feldman had with Corey Haim. And so it goes into a lot of detail about Corey Haim. This book is almost just as much about Corey Haim as it is about Corey Feldman. Hollywood really destroyed Corey Haim. Corey Feldman, yes, he had a rough go of it, but ultimately he didn't let it destroy him. He survived it. But Corey Haim not so much. So it was really sad to hear about what happened to this guy, and he was really taken advantage of really bad and really abused really bad, and it seemed like it really messed him up really bad, and how could it not? And that's the thing, like with that kind of lifestyle, you have all this fame, you have all this money hitting you at once, and when you don't have good adults in your life, people who should be protecting you and looking out for you, who are making all these crazy decisions, I mean, your life can really run off the rails quick because you yourself don't have the mental or emotional maturity yet to deal with this kind of stuff. And so, like, a lot of people just get chewed up by this machine of Hollywood. And unfortunately, Corey Haim was one of them. So that part of the book was really sad. And as for what I liked about this book, like as I said, there's a bright and a dark side to this book, because it does kind of hit all the nostalgia, targets for me as far as that go, talking about all these old films and how life was in Hollywood back in the 80s and things like that. But then again, there was the dark side of it too, which, even though it was horrible and all that, at the same time, it is interesting to see how Hollywood is portrayed as this place where dreams come true, but there really is this horrible dark side to it where you're going to pay a heavy price for those dreams coming true. The other thing about this book, I have to say, this book was a page turner. It was very interesting. It was paced very well. It didn't drag in any places, and it moved along really quick. As far as dislikes go, honestly, there wasn't anything in this book that I really disliked. I thought it was very well written, and it moved along really quick, and the subject matter was interesting and disturbing at the same time. But it was an interesting story. Now, should you go out and read this book? I mean, I thought the book was very good, and it was a very interesting read, and it was a book that was on my reading list for a long time that I wanted to get to. But I have to say, if you are sensitive about that kind of stuff, that heavier subject material of sexual abuse and those kinds of things, then I don't know. Maybe you might want to skip this one, because it has some very heavy subject matter in it. And if you do decide to read it, then you have to follow it up with something light. Like, I read this book. This was the first book I read in 2023. And right after, I had to follow it up with a Forgotten Realms book, just as a palate cleanser, because I needed something really light afterwards. I couldn't take anything heavy after reading this book, because it is some very serious subject matter in it. Now, this is not the first book I've read like this that goes into a celebrity's life or an autobiography about a celebrity. I've read a few of them in the past, listened to a few of them on Audible, but I have to say this one was really good. And if I did a top 5 list of books like that, this one would definitely make the top 5. And as for what more I can say about the book, that's everything I guess I can say about Corey Feldman, Coreyography. He survived a lot of really bad shit, but he did survive it, and he went on, and he seems like he's thriving to this day with his band, and he still does movies and all that stuff. So that's everything I got to say in this video. Let me know what you think in the comments section, and I will see you at the next one. I'd like to say thank you to all of my subscribers. I appreciate you all in helping this channel grow. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Also, don't forget to hit the bell icon so you'll be notified when new videos are uploaded.